What exactly is the SEC contending here?
So the SEC is trying to, weigh in on one of the biggest issues facing the crypto industry. It's whether these exchanges like Coinbase are actually listing the tokens that they're listing are securities. And, if the SEC determines that they are, that potentially requires these firms to register as exchanges with the regulator. So it could be a big deal. Um, it comes at a time when a lot of these exchanges are arguing that they don't offer any securities, that actually all of the tokens on their platforms are commodities. So it's definitely a hot debate right now.
Sonali, why is it so confusing? Why is it so hard to answer that question? Is crypto a security?
It's a good question. And think about how many renditions this argument has taken over the last couple of years, whether you're talking about NFTs or ICOs or crypto itself, the tokens itself. And I go back to what Brian Armstrong had said in a big tweet thread last year. Remember, this is when it really started to get very contentious between the industry and the agencies. And, what Brian Armstrong said at that time is they refused to tell us why they think it's security and instead subpoena a bunch of records from us. We comply, demand testimony from employees, we comply, and then tell us that they'll sue us if we launch certain products. So, to Allyson's point here, a lot of this is being done through enforcement rather than rulemaking itself. So until the agencies decide what's a currency, what's a commodity, and what's a security, it's going to be very difficult for the industry to work around that.
Now, Allyson, is this connected to the insider trading investigation that was brought against a former Coinbase manager just last week?
So the ongoing probe into whether Coinbase is improperly offering unregistered securities is separate, but it does have some ties that, the insider trading probe does have some ties that could connect to Coinbase as well. So in the SEC's complaint last week that dealt with, a former Coinbase employee potentially leaking information to his brother and a friend, at least that's the allegation. The SEC did identify 9 tokens that it thought were securities. And so at the time, before we knew about this other probe that actually predates those allegations, at the time I was talking to folks who said, this does have effects on Coinbase as well, because the exchange has said that it lists 7 of the 9 that were identified. So essentially implies, if the SEC thinks these are securities and Coinbase is listing 7 of them, then it's kind of a backdoor way of saying that, they do need to come in and register. And it works off of what SEC Chair Gary Gensler has been saying for a long time now, that he thinks a lot of these exchanges are offering securities and a lot of them need to come in and comply with his agency's rules.
Sonali, what are next steps here?
The next steps are interesting here because if you look, for example, just all the way back at Coinbase's S1, its IPO filing, it said that the evolving regulatory landscape would be a risk factor for investors. And look how much it has been one. The scoop that Ali had put out just today, for example, Coinbase's stock dropped about 20%. And with the total stock drop you've seen this year, the market cap has come down so much, Emily. Think about it. It is less than half the size of NASDAQ now. And when it went public, it was much, much bigger. So remember, exchanges in the United States, stock exchanges, have what the industry likes to call or think of as quasi-regulatory powers. So when you look at these big crypto exchanges, which are kind of the primary way here to regulate the industry or oversee the industry, are they going to look more like stock exchanges in the future, where they have rulemaking capabilities, where they're more subject to SEC oversight, or also how much will the agencies fight it through themselves and have the CFTC have more claim over some of these assets as commodities instead? It's an open question, and it will be played out, it looks like, in courts in a lot of cases.
Allyson, any precedent for where this could land, or none at all, because digital assets are so new?
So not a lot of precedent here in terms of whether digital assets are securities. This is actually the first time that we've really seen the SEC come out and list specific tokens that it thinks are securities, despite having said for probably over a year now that it thinks that these exchanges do have securities on them. So it's kind of a rare move for the agency. It's normally strayed away from making those specific identifications partly because it's probably, you know, we talk to folks who say it's not really in their interest to kind of pigeonhole themselves into, you know, these assets are securities, these assets are commodities. By keeping it a little bit vaguer, it gives them a little bit more leeway.